let's go back to logic of sense. So we're on chapter 5, on the question of absurdity and sterility. So one of the things to take note of is this relationship between sterility and then he in the same environment talks about the word absurd. What do you think that means to talk on the one side about something that is called sterile and counter attach it, let's say, or in some way have in the same chapter something that's called absurd? So in other words, sterile, if one were going to do the opposite of sterile, would be, obviously not sterile, or some. Oh, Rebecca, you didn't say who you were. Oh, you did.
Oh yeah.
Yes, you did. Sorry.
How would you actually?
How would you actually think of this thing called absurd, rather than dirty or raw or sexual or blood or this kind of thing that tends to be the non-sterile, the unsterile? So why would absurd be in that same thing? What does the word absurd bring to mind?
I always think of it in terms of overwhelm. So sometimes when I'm really just bombarded with stuff, it might hit me the absurdity of everything that's happening. I'm just like,
so it's almost like a joke.
Absurd. It's like, yeah.
It's like a Victor Meldrew
the point
thing.
where the only thing you can do is laugh or you'll cry.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
Yes.
kind of my concept of absurd, and I guess in that way it is kind of the opposite of sterile, where
But it's a weird
able to
opposite,
sort of
no?
sequentially- It is a weird opposite.
And that's what. Let's try and figure out what that is.
It's
so we can-
spatially opposite.
It's spatially.
Yeah.
Nice.
I see it as spatially opposite.
Yes, but you see everything as spatially.
I know.
So it doesn't really count. But can you develop that?
It's just in terms of clutter, I guess. So when I get to the point of seeing absurd, it's because of clutter. It's because of this stuff that's sort of occupying my mental space and indeed physical space as well. There are times when I think my house is utterly absurd. And definitely the opposite of sterile.
But this is very important to get a sense of how the word sterile is invoking a spatial comment, and therefore how the word absurd is also playing around with the spatiality. Now, what then does it mean to talk about spatiality, since you're doing the cinema stuff, the cinema time? Can time be spatial in this way? Can there be absurd forms of time? Like what? You're nodding. Yes.
Sorry, I was coming back to what Sarah said about removing the cat, how you can remove the cat. And I'm kind of...
You can surgically remove the cat.
Yeah.
Sterile cat.
Yeah.
Sterile cat suggests, I would kind of go more maybe temporality instead of a time. And time is space, space is time, so we can say kind of similar things. But if something performs the cat, or there is a cat, that means could mean that belongs to the beginning, middle, and linear temporality, in which something starts, something goes, and something ends. If we think about something that does not have a cat, that cannot be cat, and becomes absurd, it's something that does belong to something else.
Okay.
And something else would be other type of temporality, something that is cannot end and does not begin.
Okay, that song is coming on.
Yeah.
And so in Claire's work and in Jama's work in particular, who are working on archives, which is a very specific or kind of a weird sense of time, because you're trying to name that which is not able to be named in an archive, and you're trying to also do that in a certain way, and yet the archive, as the word archive speaks about time of some kind, some kind of time, a collective sense of time, community time, something like that, a collectible time. So when you can collect time, there's a spatiality involved, right? Or no? Or we're just making that up, leaving the row, yes, go on.
Yes.
Well done. Venturing into the Deleuzian morass.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
I was just thinking about, because the term sterile had, in my mind, was somewhere a bit different. So
Well,
the opposite of
it is.
sterile for me was fertile.
Fertile. That's interesting. Yeah.
So I was thinking about sterility versus fertility rather than versus
Like
raw.
cleanliness versus dirt, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Huh.
And fertility has this character of continuity.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know this the fact that the fertility of the human race, that it keeps on reproducing and growing
Mm-hmm.
and growing.
I like how you're growing like this.
Growing, yeah, because it grows horizontally, and it grows in time, and it
Yeah.
grows in size. So it's a combination of things. I'm not sure how to explain it, but I'm not sure if I understand it completely. But the absurdity of this fertile growing of the human being could, in this sense, be the opposite of the sterility.
Yes, because it is absurd,
Yeah, absolutely.
fertility.
It's like, you know,
I
growing.
mean, life is absurd.
Yeah,
Is that what you're getting at?
yeah. It's like I always had this sense. I mean, that human beings are some sort of viruses.
Uh-huh.
They grow without limits, and they have this.
You are
this
human.
capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not the they, really.
No,
Yeah.
no, we.
That's right. Yeah.
We, the human race,
Yes.
the destructive human race,
Mhm.
we have this character of destruction just to continue on surviving and growing in different ways. Just like virus settlements in a way, or
Hmm. Lovely.
bacterial settlements, something of that. I always had this image in my mind of how human race grows and destructs. Not necessarily that bacteria is as destructive as humans.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Although I had struck the other day.
But
and
yeah, I always had this feeling that the way we can compare humans is to viruses.
And how do you understand a virus? Because a virus is different than a bacteria.
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, my understanding of virus then, because that was an idea that came to me when much younger, had to do with the relation of the virus with the human body, that it invades the space, and it grows and hurts and causes pain and causes sickness, and it just keeps on growing, and there's barely any way to control it. Of course, scientifically, there could be, medically, I don't know, but I had this idea that it just keeps on growing. And if we look at the scale of the universe, then, you know.
Do you think it's possible to say that the universe is a virus?
I don't know.
Tam, what do you think? Is it just like too creepy at the moment?
Virus probably be very negative.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a downer. It must be fun to live
It is
with.
negative. It is negative.
Are there any good viruses?
No. I'm just kidding, I don't know. It could be, what were you going to say, Alberto?
They're using viruses in treating brain tumors.
Are they?
Yeah, they inject the live virus and it eats the brain.
Thank you.
The
Yeah.
tumor. So they do treat you.
There's
So they are
some of
positive
them.
viruses.
The great they. Yes, right, okay. That's right. Okay. We haven't gotten much further yet, but we're getting a little close. Yeah.
Just picking up on what you were saying about sterility for fertility, if you think about the splitting, so if you think about fertile splitting as multiplying,
Right.
sterile splitting is a splitting where you don't create more than one. So you kind of get to the absurdity of maybe a strip or...
Excellent. Can you enlarge on that a little more? Or is that just going to die there on the table?
Well, it's to do with this surface, obviously, isn't it? That you can't, which is where we perhaps maybe Ryle Mark. I'd like to hear Mark at some point on
Dialectics, right? That's right.
But yeah, that idea that obviously splitting away the
Mark's been
thesis,
very good.
antithesis.
We have an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, that all the students get to speak before Mark.
Only because I'm sat here.
Only because you're a very nice and kind person. Yes. Okay, what do you want to say about dialectics there?
Don't.
Oh, excellent!
Sit on it.
Excellent, well done.
He has already written a page and a half.
I know. It's like,
I'll write it.
it's that calm anger that just, Okay, yes, Sarah.
I'm kind of interested in the two different words which have the same root, which is continue, and so continual and continuous, because of what you were speaking about sort of that reproductive element. These are sort of, it's continue, hang on, which way around is it? Is it continuous in the sense that it's an event that keeps repeating? And then Jakob was talking about sort of sterility as being something as the temporal thing with no sort of beginning or end, which says continual, maybe, or am I completely...
So the continual sounds like a linear sense of logic, and the contiguous is actually what you're thinking
Oh,
about,
right, okay.
I think, or some kind of repeatable simultaneity.
Yeah, yeah. But
Tam, you breath?
There is on page 31 something that resonates with
Okay.
what you're
Can
saying.
you read it out loud?
The paradox.
Wait.
Could we just have first paragraph words for people with different editions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So,
So.
still in the 5th series, just what does the page start with, the paragraph start with?
The paragraph starts with the paradox of sterile division or of dry reiteration.
Okay, got it.
What page is that on in the text?
Okay, looking at the second one.
In your text?
38.
38 in, what book
38.
is this one? Can you
So
see
this is
Continue.
31.
That's a terrible book. Okay. No, I mean, it's a terrible edition. Sorry. I don't mean, anyway. Yeah, go on, read it.
It's just that sentence, that the way that it's.
Can you read it, can you read that?
The paradox of sterile division or of dry reiteration.
Mhm.
So reiteration is something repeating again,
Yeah.
right?
Well, what's the difference between iteration and reiteration? Or is it just like a completely mad word that is
Maybe
itself twice?
continuity, that you're not just repeating it once, maybe you're repeating it more. Or
But repeating does imply that it's more than once, right? Otherwise it can't repeat.
the idea that it's actually or, so it's like defining this with that as well. So dry reiteration, does it also mean sterile division?
Well, it depends on how the translation is. I guess we don't know. Does anybody have the French here? Do you have the French? Yeah, no, okay. Because it's part of it is the translation, I'm sure. The paradox of sterile division, but there's a comma, or of dry reiteration. So it strikes me that it's actually saying that it's not, here's another way of thinking about sterile division, but rather it's paradox of sterile division, comma, or the paradox of dry reiteration, but not that sterile division and dry reiteration are the same thing, but maybe they are the same thing. In any case, what does it mean to iterate versus reiterate?
I think iterate is to continue and reiterate is to repeat.
Okay, and to repeat what?
First iteration.
Is it repeated the same,
That was a guess. Yes, we got
repeated identically? So there's no.
the iteration.
I don't know.
Is it about giving it a different kind of emphasis when you reiterate something?
Colloquially it is.
Right.
Maybe something is out of growth and now it's either divided or reiterate.
So close, and yet so far. Okay.
I'm trying.
No, I know, you're doing good, you're doing good. I'm not, I'm not picking on you, I'm picking near you.
And iteration is something that if you have a different iterations of something, that implies a difference, doesn't it? Whereas
Okay,
reiteration is
getting
same.
good, okay.
Yeah.
Say it again?
But iteration implies difference, and reiteration implies same, or repetition of same.
Iteration is a copy.
And what's iteration then?
So iteration is a copy.
So then what's reiteration
Reiteration is a repetition.
of the copy?
Yeah.
But the copy is different from the original.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like a second.
Yes.
Welcome to the
Whereas reiteration is like trying to recapture the original in that sense.
The what?
Wait, what?
Say it again?
So a reiteration is like trying to capture again the original, whereas an iteration is a copy or adjudication or a duplicate.
So see, I would have said that was the opposite way around.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got okay, how many people are on the side of Ed here who say it again, which was your
Iteration is a duplicate.
Yes. Always. No. You don't have to take sides. How many people can see both sides? How many people think that it's both sides? Okay, good. All right, so we're going to take sides. Okay, so how many people think that it's... What, Ed, say again what you were saying?
Iteration would be a duplicate. And a
Iteration, yeah,
yeah,
is a duplicate.
And a reiteration would be a repetition to capture the capture the original, or to at least to repeat the original.
And how do you capture an original by repeating it? How does that work?
It's as if it's by emphasis. It's like an. It's
So
like
that's
placing
what
emphasis
Ajama
on
was
it.
saying. Although Ajama, you're making small I. So that means...
So does it mean it's not, it can be not identical?
So close. What were you going to say? What's team B over here in the corner? The couch team? What were you saying with Ron?
I think iteration is within representation, whereas reiteration is outside representation in the sense that it's just the event that is repeated, but it is not.
And why does poor iteration have to do with representation? What happened there?
Sorry?
Why did you put iteration with representation?
I was just trying to translate what he said.
Oh well, yeah, it's his fault.
It's fine.
I was trying to translate. I mean, I don't know if he's right or not. I was just trying to translate in my terms what he was saying.
Okay.
In a sense, like if I need to find a difference
Okay.
between the two, I would say like I don't know which of the two is what, but like let's say that we have. I think what one should be, if one is copy, one is representation. In the sense that you represent something.
Okay.
So you are within.
Well, do you think it's the same as present versus represent? Do you think it's the same kind of problem? You have this thing called present, then you have represent or
I think-
represent, or then you have iteration and reiteration.
I think that is one of the.
That is wrong. I've just led you down the wrong
Okay.
path. Okay, so I
Right,
just
okay.
said no is the answer.
Okay,
Okay,
so the-
no.
So,
Okay.
so instead of that, I think is rather than having a thing, then it's repeated.
Okay.
You have an event, so it's not based on the thing, but it's an encounter that is repeated.
Close again. Yeah, Ed.
Can we try not to go? Have another run at it?
Yeah,
For a
sure.
second?
Why not?
So it's iteration, in a sense, forward progression.
Yes.
And a reiteration is a trying to recapture, a return or a looking backwards.
Now we agree.
Okay.
No,
We might both be wrong, but at least we agree.
I
Dane,
don't think that's
you-
possible.
Yeah. No. Okay. Go on.
Sorry.
No. Why is it not possible? Or maybe it's just absurd.
It will become fertile now.
That's right. Suddenly. That's right.
Going back to the original, which I don't know what is it,
Don't worry about what the original is. We're just going to go back to it.
is impossible.
It's
an
impossible. to go to the-
impossibility.
Yes. Why is
It's,
that? Why is it impossible?
Because whatever we're talking about, something, it happened in a tempo-spatial time. And once we have lost that moment, going back to it is an impossibility. You can come close to it, but you can never go back to it exactly. You can come close to imagining it. You can come close to representing it. That's how I would
And that's
say
what the
reiteration.
reiteration is.
Yeah.
Okay. We got Jama and Dane. Yes.
No, I was thinking. I think I agree with you. But then there's always traces anyway. So basically, there's no. It's still.
Well, I mean, in a minute. Did you want to say one thing? No, I just thought you did. If you didn't.
I'd say reiteration is a sort of reenactment of the same on a surface, which transforms that surface. So it's not repeating something in moment 2, but it's reenacting on moment 1, which represents it, not represents it.
Represents the that which could have come first, but doesn't have to be first because there's no first.
Doesn't have to be an original note.
And is that why later in the paragraph, Deleuze is speaking about God or God to be? Is that what you picked up? Yeah. Want to just read down to the the whole, if you just get down, I mean, we don't have to get into the sky is blue, but maybe we can just read down to the sky is blue. Can you do that, Tam? Can you read it to, yeah, 3/4 down? Yeah, just start at the beginning again.
Okay, the paradox of sterile division, or
Now you have to
of-
read it as though you really mean it.
Okay.
Like,
The paradox of sterile division or of dry iteration.
yes, this is an Academy read, an Academy Award read. Yes, fine.
There is indeed a way of avoiding this infinite regress. It is to fix the proposition, to immobilize it, just long enough to extract from it its sense. The thin film at the limit of things and words.
Now, how do you picture that? This sounds very surgical. Sounds very, did anybody ever see the film The Fly? You know, when he's trying to extract it and suddenly it turns out he becomes the head of the fly. It just doesn't work right. So it becomes really weird. Okay, this is something really odd going on here. There's this extraction going on. Can you just read that sentence again? Can you just start again? Because what I want people to really think about here is this notion of how it means, what is a proposition, what does it mean to fix it, to mobilize it. This is like your work does this, it sets it somehow in the middle of creating the cuts. Yeah, go on.
So there is indeed a way of avoiding this infinite regress. It is to fix the proposition, to immobilize it, just long enough to extract from it its sense.
Okay, so he's saying here that there's a paradox of sterile division, or the paradox of dry reiteration. He's saying that if it's true what Ed said earlier, that, and then Dane re-invoked it, that there's this endless form of, or an infinite form of the regress, then how do you actually make it, quote, work? How do you make it make sense so that it's not just this thing that's going on back onto itself? Okay, so he's saying, well, there is a way to fix the proposition. Okay, continue.
The thin film at the limit of things and words. Hence, the doubling up which we just observed in Carroll's work at each stage of the regress. But is it the destiny of sense that this dimension be indispensable, or that we do not know what to do with it as soon as we attain it? What have we done, indeed, aside from disengaging a neutralized double of the proposition, a phantom, and a phantasm without thickness? Is it because the sense is expressed by a verb in the proposition that the verb is expressed in its infinitive, participial, or interrogative form, got to be, or the being blue of the sky, or is the sky blue?
So has he just gone off on one again? Is this another one of his LSD moments? What's he saying here? Bruno, you want to give it a go? I'll try it. It's too much.
Yeah.
Okay. Stuart?
Not really the subtleties of it, it's about the language as language to me always you sort of end up either as a barrier or as a conduit.
Mm-hmm.
And is it around that slipperiness depending on how it's used? That it becomes a way of encountering. Yeah, but
I mean, later on in the paragraph, as we will come to see in a minute, he refers to the Stoics then as understanding the sterility of the event, in fact, the point of the Stoicism.
Yeah.
Now, your work is dealing with Stoicism on some level.
Yes. Yeah.
Or anyway, the Cynics.
Cynics, well, that's Cynics and Stoics. They're close, aren't they?
Yes. That's right. Yes. Yes.
But yeah, I just struggle with some of the terms, the proposition. I know it comes up a lot, but it's
Yeah. What is a
one
proposition?
of those that.
What is a proposition? Now you are dreading the fact that you didn't really study your English. Oh, by the way, there's cookies. You want to just open this up?
If you know what
Exactly! Yes, how did you know that?
Well, I was going to say the sky's blue, but there is cookies sounds a better.
Yeah, it also has a reward at the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And what is propositional about that? Did you make these? What do you mean? You sort of made them.
I help.
You helped.
So this proposition, I don't know the etymology, but does it have a link with positionality? Is it to, or is it to do with proposing? So I presume it's proposing, which I guess is still position.
Well, if you propose something, but it's stronger than proposing it. It's not like an idea.
I think when Deleuze said it has to have those elements in it of denotation, signification,
Yeah, the three,
sense, and
Well
the other
done.
one, and the other one.
the three
there's four of
dimensions.
them.
And
So
then
if it's got that much, it's a proposition.
There's more. There's more. Yeah, take one before he takes him out.
Manifestation, sorry. Manifestation.
Yeah.
The human factor.
Okay. Let's try it again.
Can I say something about
Yeah, go
proposition?
on. Yeah.
It might,
As long as
it
you
might
link
help,
it
I
to
don't
a
know.
cookie.
Yeah. But it seems that he's trying to firstly redefine proposition, so that he has to look firstly at the assumption that when proposing something, you're either searching for a truth or a falsehood. By complicating that, and by saying that a proposition can be denoted, manifest, and signify, there's a sense in that perhaps, but that sense is something that, if we come back to this page, will always be accessible as long as nothing is affirmed or negated. So you have to have a kind of suspension to get sense out of something, and sense can't be part of the proposition, but mainly only suggested by it, which is why it's kind of a questionable fourth element, I guess, of...
Can you repeat this
I
notion
don't
of the
know.
suspension? The suspension bit. That's
If you
key
come back
here.
to the next line after the sky
After the sky is blue, yes.
Or before it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, after. Sense brings about the suspension of both affirmation and negation. Firstly, it brings it about, which maybe brings us back to, I mean, it is a paradox of propositions, but also of sense, these 4 or 5 paradoxes, whatever they are. So the one about sterility and regress, it seems, has to do with suspension. And as long as there's suspension, there's the possibility for sense-making. But, and this is something that also maybe speaks to Deleuze's later work on multiplicity and subjectivity, but as soon as you kind of pin down truth or falsehood and go to the old definition of the propositional, you kind of, you block sense in some ways.
You block it, yes. So in that sense it becomes sterile, not fertile.
Exactly.
Yes.
So the absurd is an the extra sensuous, or the extra sensical.
Sensical.
Extra being.
Well, that's great. That's extra sensical. I like that. The extra sensical perception. Just sounds like it does. Dane, can you give a little tiny synopsis of Kierkegaard's ethical move that he does with the suspension of the teleological suspension of the ethical? Just because there's a parallel here.
Okay, so something becomes universal.
So the first start with Kierkegaard is still dealing with the question of the universal.
Something.
For those people that are not familiar with the universal, what is the problem with the universal? I mean, in a sentence.
It's
For our work here.
it sort of lays down the law. It offers an absolute ontological position to determine whether something is what something is, what its identity is, whether it's good, bad, that sort of thing. There's an authentic position on which you can take to judge something.
And it also does what? Clue is in the title. Universal. Universal. What is a universal as opposed to a multiversal? Just one. It creates a totality. So universality is based on totalizing. And so there's an explosion of totalizing. So that's one of the big aspects of this, is that one rips apart the the making into a unity of some kind. Okay, so now, but Kierkegaard is still making into this unity, but he's realizing there's a problem with the ethics, because this whole conversation comes up when he's talking about Abraham, who's been hearing the voice of God, and Abraham is told by God, kill your son, don't tell anybody, and so on and so forth. It's a longer story, but the short version is this. And the question is, how was Abraham nuts? B, was he hearing voices or not hearing voices, and so on and so forth? Was he unethical? And so, of course, Kierkegaard develops this whole thing in Fear and Trembling. And what does he come up with? How does he come up with the the teleological suspension of the ethical, which is not dissimilar to, there's no teleology here, but there's a suspension of sense here in order that sense comes in. So in Kierkegaard, there's a suspension of the teleological. Can you explain that teleological suspension?
To teleologically suspend something means to, not to sort of do away with it, but to sort of elevate it, to hold it above something. So like a sword over somebody's head. That's
Damocles, for example.
Yeah. So if you see the sword hanging over someone's head that can sort of fall at any time, it sort of changes the game. You have to. It's up to you to sort of step up and choose an action which you want to do. Do you sort of make the leap? Do you go ahead?
Do you cut the string? Do you knock the person out? Yeah.
And that choice that you make isn't resolved universally. It's just a choice that you have to make without any other justification on any kind of ethics or objectivity or anything like that. It's just a choice which you have to make at that moment in that time, and it can't be repeated, it can't be explained, it can't be justified in any other way. It just has to be done.
So the making of that choice, the jumping in to make a choice, there's something happens so that you'd be walking along the street, and you see something horrible happening, and you just keep walking, or you're compelled to do something. Why would you be compelled? Somebody's drowning in the canal, and you walk along and go, God, you don't look good, sorry. Why would you be compelled to jump in? Would it be some moral feature saying, there's a human being suffering, I'm going to go after them? What would be this? What's the go-to thing? Why would you jump in? What was Kierkegaard's thing? What's that? So you see a sword over someone's head. There's too many people, right? We had already had this. They're all vermin.
Well, it's why it has to be, in Fear and Trembling, it has to be Isaac, it has to be Abraham's most beloved son, in order to get him to actually make that movement. He couldn't have done it if he had to go up and kill anyone else because God told him to. He probably could have done it, but because it's his most beloved son, the most important person to him in the whole world, it creates that tension, in which nothing else could have, no other person could have made that conflict, that tension.
You're saying about the tension. So the tension, be aware of this in your work. So the tension calls to you somehow. He's trying to get you to understand how you kind of get fascinated, like fascinated.
That sort of holds the universal away just enough. You can lead your curiosity into it without it being justified by anything else that you're doing it because of some other reason.
Excellent.
It's just because you're curious about that thing, and that sort of draws you in.
Excellent. Yeah.
Does that come back to what you were saying about being rubbed by something? A rubbing.
Kind of. But I think it speaks more to temporality.
Why?
Foucault, it's completely unrelated, but Foucault uses this beautiful phrase to describe homosexuals before there was a 19th century move towards identity, and it became identity, and he talks about temporary aberrations. And those moments which dangerous describe, those are temporary aberrations, something that happens outside of time. And that's what draws you in. That would make sense in that moment. And it has something to do space, time, it just disrupts something.
That's
It's
very-
outside the universal.
Very
Yeah,
important.
and
very
that
important point.
disrupts it, and that disrupts it to the extent that suddenly you if you kind of make, because when you talk about aberration, everything you talk about something very fast, so it's and kind of disappears.
Yeah.
So there's just memory of it, or whatever you call it. There's a wave after it.
Yeah.
Big bang, and there's a wave after bang.
Yeah, yeah.
But gravity, and there's a wave of
Yeah,
gravity.
yeah,
You know, UV light.
Any other
And-
examples?
But what I'm trying to say is that sometimes it's in some ways very continuous and very constant. That stays and can be lengthy, but it doesn't have beginning on end per se. It just is. It becomes the kind of temporality, but it's not minimalistic. That it's not a second of. It just takes infinity.
Crucial point.
Yeah.
Crucial point. Sarah, can you
Because it's
translate
not
that?
linear. It's not in beginning and end. It just happens outside of it. Certainly.
Can you restate what Jakob just said?
I don't know if I can state exactly what Jakob said, but my sort of summarisation of the whole discussion thus far is that
That's right. To change it totally.
yeah,
Go into a
take us
completely
down
different
another
direction.
track.
Yeah.
No, for me, the suspension of the teleology of the ethical is, as I was saying, just that sort of moment where you can like pause time, and you can say, okay. So if the universal is kind of operating as it operates, and then suddenly you're sort of faced with this frozen moment, as it were, where from the universal standpoint, it looks as though you're just acting, but actually you have that sort of temporal space where sense happens, thought happens, things happen that can't be explained, they can't be spoken about in that sort of universal space, I guess. And I think that's what Kierkegaard is talking about.
So, Simon, you were shaking your head. Was that because you just didn't believe her, or is that because you're thinking you can never get out of time? That's right. I have children
Just
that are driving me
repeating.
mad. That's
Yeah,
right.
but you can never get out of time. It's not like because
Okay, good.
you're jumping into different time in a
It's-
sense. That's
you-
just
Different
Is it-
time, isn't
Is it not
Good.
elasticity? It's about elasticity, isn't it?
Good,
Because
good.
that's where you get the tension into it. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
if you imagine literally an elastic band, so it's that time that you can move, and it's that same. There you go. You don't have to imagine that. Props department.
That's right, yes.
But you can hold it between two fingers, so you've got that part that remains flexible, and so that's all still wibbly wobbly. Whereas the part, could you turn my?
do you want me to like stretch it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was twice.
And then but it changes, but it's between those two.
But
points, isn't
the
it?
reason I gave you the rubber band was because when you really think about it, the rubber band has a limit.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
much you can
So
stretch.
would there be a limit to this?
Well, because that's where you get into this infinite.
Because he says at the very first sentence of the paragraph that you brought to our attention, that Tam brought to our attention, he said that there's a way to fix it. And he didn't mean just analytically, because the one thing that's really wonderful and also annoying about Deleuze is that he's not analytically posing this. I mean, he is analytically posing it, but it's not because he's trying to make logical sense in a scientistic sense. He's saying there are reasons what fixes this. It's not just the logic that works. It's the practical thing that happens that fixes it. So if you pull that rubber band at some point, don't do it too far because you'll hurt yourself. But
I mean, there is a kind of, is there something that fixes it? So is there a limit? Well, you can say yes and you can say no. You can say whatever you want about it. in a
okay,
sense.
thank you,
No,
Jakob, for clarifying.
no, that because it's like if we still even talking about the temporal. I love that phrase. I'm gonna use it. Temporal aberration. So something that's deviant pulse that kind of changes the sense of time or creates a new sense in temporality. That's still being discussed in the idea of there is a rest of time, and that time is just happens in some sort of relationship to this time. Well, it happens it's
All the time.
such a multiplicity and happens all the time at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a multiplicity of it. So each of that operation has its own sense, and they multiply them. And within those operations, they multiply. That kind of fractality comes into it. Idea of fractality comes into it.
So it's fractal,
So
but it's
there's-
also what Raoul was saying.
Yeah.
which is the virus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so it kind of, that's what happened. So, in a way, there is no limit. There is a limit if we kind of still compare it to the time, to the kind of more traditional time, let's say. There is a limit there, but there is no limit because we're talking about multidimensionality.
Mhm.
So there is no limit to multidimensionality, and infinity is a limit as well to some extent. So there's some.
Why could, in what way is infinity a limit to?
Well,
Because, I think it
and I don't know that. I'm stopped.
okay, we can
That's
go
it.
with the,
Halfway done.
do you want to just throw some water on the table?
Can I just say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go with it.
Yeah, sure, and then we'll get to the water.
When the ethical suspension of the universal, like
Wait, say it again.
I think the suspension is a common sense kind of idea, but what's interesting to me is this word. It's a virtue in Abraham. The tension is between bodies, between his relation to God and Isaac.
Mhm.
His love of God and love of Isaac is a tension. But virtue is what I think of as it's a good in itself. It's not a poiesis, it's not a means to an end, it's not a construction,
Mhm.
it's not a sterile event, it's not a thought event, it's a tension, a courage is a virtue.
Mhm.
You know, when you talk about the sword hanging over this,
Mm.
this notion of courage is a virtue. So the bravery that he has, that Abraham has to undergo is within this tension within bodies.
Mhm.
You know, the bodies, the passion for God, passion for the child, and the tension that brings into. Without the sterility of it, a sense of it to clarify the position, just that tension, and which way he leads eventually, which is. But I think this notion of the virtue in here is really interesting. It brings in the story of courage, of course, and the courage of truth, and that whole area to explore through that. I just think it's a really interesting notion.
Yeah.
This notion of the virtue as set over, particularly gets set over like poiesis, which is a production, a means-end relation, and or a praxis, which is an act. So these kind of concepts, which are kind of interesting to me, that Kierkegaard is still very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the way in which the virtue gets established, though, is slightly different. In fact, it's totally different than what Deleuze is saying here.
Yeah.
Can you?
No.
No.
I'll be quiet.
Okay. Stuart?
Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to mention vibration,
Okay.
which seems to me that he gets onto
What page?
in the next page. So 32
Or
in
39.
this one.
Can you read from the last? Can you read from the Stoics onward? Because I know where you're going with this. If you can just read to where you want to go, but if you can just from where it says from this.
39?
Yeah, from 39 of, well, it's 31 if it's on Books PDF, and 32, and if you have the, what edition is it in? That's Continuum, right? Yeah, the Continuum edition. If you have the Continuum edition, it's 38 and 39.
Stoics, wait, I'm gonna, after that, Stoics, the paradox may be called.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So the
So-
paragraph below it starts with, in that book it's 32.
Okay, let's all try and get on the same page. Okay, so what page are we on?
32 in the
In the Constantine
and it's
Bundes book.
it's the tail end of the paragraph before the one that starts extracted from the proposition.
Okay.
Does that-
We're all there. We're all there. Okay, so, but the paragraph before extracted from the proposition, is that what you're going to read?
Is it, well, you suggested
Yes,
I go back
please.
to.
Yes.
well,
Can you do the paradox may be called Stoic?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
This paradox may be called the Stoics paradox.
Which is what? What is that paradox? Good. Thank you.
Sorry,
Aren't you glad Wood stays?
I didn't hear that.
Can you shout it?
Sterility and regression.
That's the Stoics paradox. And why is it the Stoics paradox? Without reading this bit, why is it the Stoics paradox? You're still with us, right?
So if we go back a few series, it's the to be cut and being cut. It's this suspension.
It's a
of
different
the
Hamlet,
event.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's to do with this suspension of sense.
Okay, so that's the Stoics paradox. You got it? Okay, so don't forget that bit. Okay.
That the proposition brings about. So a proposal suspends the affirmative and the negative, so you have sense in between.
And that's with the Stoic. Is that okay? Did you get that?
Yeah. I'm just not sure if I'm following on everything.
Really? Crazy. Why not? What's the matter with you? It's only your second day in the seminar. Both of you are doing very well. Okay. Yes. Okay. They will never.
I'm sorry.
They will never return. There's this poor student that came in earlier who was really upset, and you said something really awful. Oh no, I said it.
Yes. I was being very positive and very energetic, very good, and then Johnny, oh.
No, you kept saying things can only. It can't get any worse. That's what you're saying.
No, it will. Like you will manage. You will get. It is okay. No, I didn't say it can get, like it can't get any worse.
Oh, I see.
Like you will. It's bad, but you can manage. You know. And what did you say?
No, I thought that what you said was it can't get any worse, and I said that it could.
So sense was suspended.
Which is why I don't do therapy. I can see that. It's just like they both turned to me. It was like she was crying, you know. And
Yes.
what? Yeah.
It's the sword of Damocles hanging. The suspension. Is it going to come down or is it not under that suspension?
Yeah, we have sense until it does one or the other.
Brilliant. So you got that. You got that nail. John, you have it nailed. So
That's
the
the
sword,
Stoics paradox.
the head. You're waiting. That's where the sense is created. That's the Stoics paradox.
But you know what I have been wondering about?
Okay, what?
Both with
Jakob?
with Jakob and
Stuart.
Stuart's ban,
Do you want to ban?
and with the sword.
Okay.
Because what's holding the sword on top of the head? And
Okay, so to bring it to temporality,
and your fingers, what are they? The fingers that.
Okay, let's like. For now, let's kind of.
That's a good question.
And then I was like, I'm just
God.
so silent and we can't figure it out.
Let's be multiplicity. So anyway, so that if you oh god no. That So that's the with temporality. So that's the holding of the sword. Yeah.
What's the holding of the sword?
Well,
What is holding the sword? What are the thumbs?
the deviant pause. There is no thumbs.
The deviant pause.
Yeah, that's the deviant pause. It's the holding of the thumbs in which something makes sense.
Okay,
Did you get that? Yeah.
if you follow Deleuze, I think this comes up in the 9th series where he talks about the problematic. So maybe your fingers are the problematic.
Yeah, that's the
event.
thing. Fingers would be problematic. The body, the assumption that you can do it is a problematic because it puts you in character position all the time, and that's kind of
It can
disregards
anthropomorphize
that
which is not alive.
Yeah, so it kind of
That didn't help, did it?
Sorry.
Well, help would. I mean, it is very important. Can you say it again? No. Okay.
What was I saying?
Let's carry on.
Let's carry on.
We're anthropomorphizing and we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But that's what we do.
But at the moment, let's just pause to know that whatever is holding the sword, let's say, and not a little nail that you're saying, like. We have been redoing our house in London, and I got this fantastic chandelier from eBay, and I got a great deal on it, and it had these like beautiful pieces of glass all over it and so on. And I was standing there looking at it when we first put it up, thinking, that just looks like it's slipping. And I called the electrician over. What do you think? Does that? He goes, no, he didn't. He goes up, he looks up, and the whole thing falls on his head. Okay, so I was just telling you that because it reminds me of the sword of Damocles. I mean, was it being held by this little tiny piece? So what is it? What's the suspension? Is it that you think that the thing holding it is going to let go, or is the sword itself going to take life? Is going to just pop into life and become like a Disney cartoon? Probably not. Yes.
Well, yeah, you don't know what's holding it up. You don't know when it's going to fall, and that gives you the choice to say, I can act now, or I can wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
So,
and so what
you
makes
can't understand, you don't know what's going to happen.
So what makes it the Stoics paradox then?
That's.
Are you doing something to it?
No.
No. Okay. It's like levitate. Oh, I see. I thought you were levitating the book. Okay, that's right. Yeah. Katja, is this making sense to you, or is this like not making sense?
Sorry?
Is it making sense to you or no?
Partially.
Partially. Okay. Don't lose hope.
I'm lost with the paradox and all of them.
You're not happy with the paradox. What does paradox mean to you?
To say something but mean something different.
So why would this be called a Stoic's paradox?
Exactly.
Exactly, that is my problem. I'm glad I caught that.
It's because it accepts its limits.
Can you say that again?
It's because it accepts its limits.
So that's the paradox.
Yeah.
Because this paradox, because the Stoic is not accepting the limits, or is suggesting there's no limit to the limit, and it goes back and forth like that. It's not about the sword falling or not falling.
And might this be? Is another paradigm that's like Zeno's paradox?
That is another paradox. That's not
It
the Stoic
is,
paradox.
but that's for Zeno's paradox to work. You have to accept fixed limits.
Right.
And in a sense, it
But
seems
you
to
know-
work as a logical proposition only because the fixed limits are there. When you think about it, you realise actually, of course, it doesn't work because it only works because the limits are there, and the limits are.
Right. And so why does that annoy a Stoic? Why would that be a paradox for a Stoic? As a Stoic, what would you like to say?
Well, that's bringing the limits to the front, isn't it?
Yes.
It's limiting with the limits.
Yes, it's limiting with limits.
Yeah.
It's okay. You'll catch on this. It's how they speak. Those Deleuzians. Yeah. Good.
But beyond that,
Does that make any more sense, Katja? Or is that still like horrific?
That's not my name.
I mean, sorry about that. What is wrong with me, Andrea? It's because Katja was at the meeting. That's what it is.
Yeah,
You look nothing like Katja. Sorry, Andrea. Does this make sense?
It's with the. I mean, I couldn't quite follow Stuart with the limits.
I was
What's your-
following Ed.
You're following the yeah.
You were following Ed.
Zeno's paradox is the idea that something is never going to reach its destination because it's only ever going to get halfway between that point and its next point. When it gets there, it's going to get halfway again. It's always going to get. There's a kind of an infinite regress in terms of it being able to reach its destination point. But it's that kind of logic is fixed by a beginning and an end point. That was the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I said then from that it's the fixing with those endpoints being forefronted that's the problem.
Yes.
The limits become the limit. The limits limit.
The limits that were just meant to be a logical feature of making something work now become not the logical feature of making it work, it becomes the necessary feature of making it happen. So before it was just something that it was just part of the picture in a way, you know, the thing that was holding up the chandelier or the sword or whatever. Now it is the thing that makes it happen or not happen. So just like, you know, we might be thinking, do we run in and grab the child who's sitting beneath the sword? But that's not the paradox for the Stoics. The paradox is the fact, it's not whether do I go in and run and save the child or do I not run and save the child. That is not the paradox. The paradox, now that we understand that sense is made in this kind of odd freeze frame, not freeze frame thing, is that there is a paradox that there's a limit that's required to make the move, when in fact it was meant to be an infinite regress. So in your work, for example, you have the same kind of problem going on, because where do you put the marker that establishes that which gets left over or that which is thrown away? You're in the Stoics paradox. That's why I was asking you about it. And I'm sorry I called you Katja. I apologize. No, it's wrong. You know, no, because it was your external I was referring to.
Well, except on that.
So it's kind of, she's in the air, you know. Yeah. Were you going to say something? No. Was there a hand over there, Lee? Were you going to say something? No.
No.
Yeah. You sure?
No. So sure.
Okay, so absolutely certain. Okay. You want to read that paragraph?
Yeah. Shall I start again?
Yeah.
Not that it's not very fun. This paradox may be called the Stoics paradox. All the way down to Husserl, there resounds the declaration of the splendid sterility of the expressed, coming to confirm the status of the Noma?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
can you do that again, because you're not reading it with passion.
No, I know. Okay.
Not really. Say again.
Okay. This paradox may be called the Stoics' paradox.
Like, pretend you're reading it to your child who, this is like a bedtime story, you're telling them a story.
Okay.
Do not go to sleep. That's right. That's right. Okay, go on.
Can we turn the lights out?
We could.
This paradox may be called the Stoics' paradox.
See, that's good. That's
Is
much
that
better.
good? Is that
Yeah,
good?
it's much better. Yeah.
All the way down to Husserl, there resounds the declaration of a splendid sterility of the expressed, coming to confirm the status of the noma.
What's a splendid sterility? That's such a great. That could be the name of a band. Splendid sterilities. What is a splendid sterility? Okay, never mind. Let's go. Okay, of the expressed, coming to confirm the status of the noma. What is a noma?
There's the noma, the denominatum.
And there's also the phenomena,
Phenomena.
right? There is.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
The stratum of expression, and this constitutes its peculiarity, apart from the fact that it lends expression to all other intentionalities, is not productive. Or if one prefers, its productivity, its nomadic service, exhausts itself in expressing.
Okay, so why did you make us read this?
No, it's the next. You made me read this.
Oh, I saw. Okay.
But
Oh,
yes,
sorry.
I was going to get to that point, thinking, why did I?
Okay, that's
It's
right.
the next paragraph.
Okay,
On
sorry,
the
okay.
O vibration, that's what I was.
Okay, right. Okay, go on.
A bit further
Sorry,
down.
sorry.
Extracted from the proposition, sense is independent of it, since it suspends its affirmation and negation, and is nevertheless only its evanescent double. Carol's smile without the cat, or flame without a candle. The two paradoxes, that of infinite regress and that of sterile division, form the two terms of an alternative, one or the other. If the first forces us to combine the greatest power with the greatest impotence, the second imposes upon us a similar task, which we must later on fulfil. The task is to combine the sterility of sense in relation to the proposition from which it was extracted with its power of genesis in relation to the dimensions of the proposition. In any case, it seems that Carroll had been acutely aware of the fact that the two paradoxes form an alternative. In Alice, the characters have only two possible means of drying themselves after falling into the pool of tears. Either to listen to the mouse's story, the driest story one could be acquainted with, since it isolates the sense of proposition in a ghostly it, or to be launched into a caucus race, running round from one proposition to another, stopping when one wishes, without winners or losers, in the circuit of infinite proliferation. At any rate,
You have to wonder what was inside that man's head. It's fantastic. To fall into a pool of tears, and the only way to dry yourself off is to listen to the driest story ever. And that's fantastic. Anyway, go on.
At any rate, dryness is what shall later on be named impenetrability, and the two paradoxes represent the essential forms of stuttering, the choric or clonic form of a convulsive circular proliferation, and the tetanic or tonic form of a fitful immobilization, as is said in Poeta fit non nascitur, spasm or whiz. These are the two rules of the poem. So yeah, the in particular it's the fitful immobilization, I think, that was what
That's great. Yeah.
was what that I was thinking about, that vibration. There's a sort of like treading water. There's a movement happening, but there's not going anywhere. So going back to the tension in the elastic.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, pointing at
That's good.
On the tension, the elastic. That's a good try.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So yeah, I mean there were a number of words there: the stuttering, it's a repetition, proliferation as well. There's a lot of accumulation.
Generative words.
Yeah. But yet there's a sort of stasis there as well.
Excellent.
And it sort of over that is, I think somebody mentioned last week, Carroll actually stuttered himself. So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I was just reading today about it. Apparently some people reckoned he only stuttered with adults, and didn't stutter with children, but other people say that's a lie. And,
It's a lie.
but yeah, he stutters.
Huh.
Yeah, to a certain degree.
Okay.
So yes, I thought that maybe added some further ground to that tension and question of tension and the time, what's happening with the time.
So I realize this is a little bit painful because it's tough to read and stuff like that. Yes, definitely painful. But hopefully what you're getting a sense of, and I mean sense in the Deleuzean term here, but the fullest malleable feeling type of thing, is that a surface can contain these things, not only contains it, but expresses it and is formed by them. And so it's almost like, where do they all come? Where does the stuttering come? It's not like a stutter is like, let's say when you're stuttering, it's not like the spaces between it's the whole thing that becomes the surface. And he's talking about how that's important, how that creates ways of being, basically. And it's very important to get a sense of that. Is that what you're trying to get at there?
Yeah, and it connects.
No.
And it connects up to the striated. It doesn't. It connects into the Thousand Plateaus territory.
How does it do that?
Well, that only just came to me then. So it's striated and smooth, isn't it? So it's the smooth that we're trying to align with through this.
Yeah.
No.
That's not.
Are you focusing on the idea of the plateau as the stutter?
No, but that sounds great.
Just this kind of, again, it's horizontality and a lateral way of thinking and arranging instead of a strata that's vertical or arborescent.
Yes, yeah, and it has that playing with the infinite, doesn't it? In the stutter, there's a sort of progress being made, but it's not, and it's rather than digging down to.
It's the same for me anyway. It's the same idea as this book starts with, Alice being in the suspension of either getting smaller or larger, and then in A Thousand Plateaus or in Rhizomatics, the focus on the blade of grass growing from the middle and not from the bottom, and growing always from the middle. I'm not sure where I want to take that, but
Okay, Sarah could take this somewhere because that's what your work does.
I may have zoned out slightly.
Oh, hello. Well, can you talk about the? Okay, you don't have to.
No, it's fine. You're talking about lateral as opposed to.
Yeah, well,
suspension again.
The notion of suspension, but the suspension going this way. So that, like for example, when we were first talking when I can't say anybody's name today. I love you all equally, so I will
You
not.
said my name.
Did I say it perfectly right?
I mean, not as we pronounce it in Arabic, but that's
Okay.
good enough for me.
Okay, good. How do you say it in Arabic?
Erwan.
Erwan.
No, with no it starts with an R. So
Say it again.
you know how the Latin people pronounce the R? So it's not the R, it's the R.
Can you say it?
Can you say it and repeat?
Erwan.
Rowan?
Yeah, Mom, closer, but it's not an O, it's an wow!
How
did we get
You
here?
get a cookie, that's it.
just about to get to the game.
How did we get here?
Because that is a plane. That was it's a plane.
Okay.
That's how we got there. So rather than trying to understand it logically and trying to put this, that's a logical feature. To understand it this way, this is what he's talking about. And so that's a very different way of spreading. And your work, particularly the work that you're doing in the Palestinian curatorial moment that you were talking about last week, has this form of stuttering going on, and at the same time creates a kind of a logic. Except it's a logic that you have to kind of already know about, but you can't know about it, right? And that's what he's talking about. And that yes, Sarah.
I was just thinking in terms of the stuttering kind of reminds me of it's like atoms moving, vibrating. Sort of
How is that?
Talking about. Well, just the Brownian motion.
Random.
Yeah.
Is it random?
Well, Brownian motion is meant to be.
Mm.
Sorry.
No, it's just that there's that sort of generative quality to that movement, I guess, that it means that it can, if it moves laterally, then it has the ability to connect with anything, so that connects back with the rhizomatic structure, obviously. But I'm not saying anything new here.
But randomness,
You're still allowed to speak. It's okay.
randomness is only the sort of average of the whole thing, isn't it? It's,
Right. Okay.
So it's random across the whole thing if it was infinite, but because it isn't, it's something particular. I don't know.
Yeah, that's you're
So
getting
it's
there.
working
You're
up.
getting there. Yeah. Well done. Yes.
I mean,
I
stuff
w-
sorry.
sorry.
Stuff is not random. It
Yeah.
does have system.
Yeah.
Why is it happening?
Yeah.
The longer
As
you
in-
stutter,
Yeah.
the more the sort of would average out to be random, wouldn't it? Maybe, perhaps.
No, there's a ways of stuttering, especially with kids, that it does.
Yes.
There's a certain moment when you stutter.
Yes.
So, for example, when you sing, you don't stutter, but
Or whisper.
or you whisper, you don't stutter.
Really?
You don't stutter, yeah.
Sometimes you don't stutter when you find intonation of the voice, so then your voice changes as you learn how to go around it, because you kind of go a little bit higher and you don't stutter.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's one particular person that makes you stutter.
Yes.
Sometimes it's one social situation that makes you stutter. So
I
there
went
is
to years ago when I had a really bad stutter, and I went to this workshop, and there was a guy who never read a paragraph in his life because he had a stutter, yeah, and the tutor says whisper, and then he just read his book seamlessly,
Wow.
because there's something about that other level that the stuttering then doesn't kick in.
And that's what we're trying to get at.
Yeah.
Because these levels aren't underneath.
True.
There's
yeah.
something out.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Not underneath. Not underneath. Jakob comes alive. Evil and yes. Right.
I was actually trying to visualize the surface and what happens on it and the
Yeah.
created tensions, and because the idea was that the surface is not a physical object, so it doesn't really have a depth.
Yeah.
The thing that came to my mind has to do with the diagrams that came out a few years ago, trying to understand how something like a Facebook works.
Yes.
And then all these networks between people and connections going back and forth, and they keep on connecting and they keep on growing. So there is some kind of ruling, not ruling, but it's not random. They connect in a sense. There is a ruling sense in how they connect, but they keep on growing. There's tension going between one point and another, and they keep on growing.
And in that group,
Multiplying and horizontally, laterally, they grow in that.
in that growth, is there anything outside of you're going like this, right?
Yeah.
So does anything sit outside of that growth?
I'm not sure. The only thing
are sure?
I thought I was sure about, or I thought I knew, is that the surface is this imaginary layer where this happens. So as if it's a cut in the air.
So is there any is there anything outside of that surface? Think about the Facebook connections. So if we had this, is this just water? Okay. So, if we have our famous water issue, let's pretend this is your network. These are all your Facebook connections. Now, is there anything else? That is your surface. And even though it's not connected, even though that outer dot there, I don't know if you can see it because the book's really big, even if the outer dot there is not literally connected, it's still part of the surface, and there's nothing beyond that dot. It ends where it ends, but it's not truly an end.
Yeah.
It's not truly a limit,
No.
right?
Yeah.
So you could say that this is all like a kind of a rough edge, as it were, but it's
Yeah.
not really an edge.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go further than the network.
It can continue on
It can.
multiplying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
It could, it could do all that
and
sort
it
of,
can splash and
and it can get annoying and things like that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
can create
It
a
can,
mass.
sorry, it can do that, but then it still can't go beyond itself.
Well, in that sense, no.
In no sense. Or in which
In the
sense?
sense of the network, it cannot go beyond itself. But what happens in the network is actually affected from something completely outside of the net.
Is it?
That's God again, isn't it?
It's God again, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's God again. No.
But that's part of the network, surely. The thing that's
The
affecting.
hip God.
No, sorry, did I say God?
I think
The part of the network, the thing that's affecting the network is the network.
I mean,
So
I
it's
think
within it.
we are back to the body holding the rubber.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is a moment in which there is some sort of problematic engineer of some sort, something that's then architect or something like that, and that becomes oddity, because at the same time, when I read this, what Stuart was reading, especially the last part about the stutter, and especially that it's written very bodily, like it's about the body. There's something happening to the body. The stutter is bodily expression. In a
Yeah.
sense. And I was kind of thinking, so what? In a sense, I was thinking, it's a temporary, like let's say that happened, the next happens, that is kind of time, and what happens to the body in all of this, and how it becomes blurred in its
And is it just
vibration.
one body?
No, because that's what happens. Then it's not, because then you are, but then you are not you are. There is no sense of subjectivity per se.
Right.
Or the only way to speak about subjectivity, the only way to speak about subjectivity is to realize multiplicity that is not one, but rather multiplicity that is kind of thing. And that kind of thing is becomes very problematic subject. because
Okay.
it's
Can
not
you
even a
put
subject.
that in kind of words?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I do performance.
That's right.
Interpretive dance. No, but there is a moment like I wonder, and does this time affect the body, or can body affect that time, and where does those effects happen, in a sense? Oh, there is no sense of the body. The kind of body loses itself.
Could you say that that's a body?
Kind of, yes.
That's a very interesting word.
In the it is, but it's not. It has sensual functions, but it's not. It's not the body that.
You want us to say body
Body
without
without
organs?
organs.
I don't want you to say body.
Well, no, I think it's great. It's the spread skill. Leotard
More
spread
leotard,
skill. Yeah, it is more leotard here. I feel like
Yeah.
I felt more afraid of almost skin when he carries the body and like spreads it.
By the way, getting back to stutter, I just wanted to say that in Oxford and Cambridge, there's a famous thing called the Oxbridge stutter, which basically, for any of you that have gone to Cambridge, you know very well what this is, which is that people just start stuttering when they're around each other. And it's a sign of intelligence, particularly in Oxbridge. And so if you don't stutter when you're there, people think that you think too clearly, because somebody who's a genius gets caught in their thoughts. And that was the early sense of what a stuttering was. And I went to High Table with a friend of mine invited me to this honey, that's all the story. And suddenly he was stuttering. And I was like, I just didn't realize he had a stutter. And I kind of asked him about it later. I said, I didn't realize you didn't know you stuttered. He goes, oh no, it's Oxbridge. Oxbridge? Oh yeah, no, and they all were stuttering. That was the thing. It was completely interesting. And it was because you have to sort of think, and you're being pushed to speak, and you don't want to speak because you have something much more important to be thinking about rather than talking to the plebs all around the table. It's a very interesting concept. And the lower class, or the further down the class rung you get, the more is considered the reversed. That stuttering is not a form of intelligence; it's a form of something's the matter with you, and get your shit together, kind of thing. But the higher up the class rank you get is considered that you are this genius.
I think
So we have to make you an aristocrat.
Yeah,
That's the moral of the
yeah,
story.
yeah. I think if you hear Prince Charles speak, he does that.
Yes, he does.
He does that.
Yes.
Thing, yeah.
So that stuttering thing though gets back to the vibration, and it gets into the area of sound, doesn't it? Because you get that sound without being able to see it. It does the vibrations.
Yeah.
Cause a sort of sympathetic. I don't know, maybe not the right word. But, so it's a different way of thinking. Sorry.
A resonance.
Resonance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was recording a pneumatic drill thing yesterday.
As you do.
As you do, yeah. And I was having to reach through a fence, and I realised the fence was shaking.
You were reaching through a fence trying to grab the drill.
No, to record.
Oh, okay. I was
the
going to say
sound,
that really ended badly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But you wouldn't notice that is coming. You know, you wouldn't see that vibration. Right. And so I'm just thinking in terms of thinking differently. You know, we're trying to picture this, trying to visualise it. But it's trying to visualise sound, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because machines stutter as well.
And how do you mean that?
I had a car that was, definitely had a stutter, and no one could get to the bottom of it. Not one mechanic, but the engine would stutter.
So a car stutters. I don't think cars in general stutter. I just want to mention that. It's a new, but okay. Take that further. Take that further about the machine.
A museum stutters information.
Okay, and what do you mean by that?
There's a dry reiteration.
There's a dry air.
There's a very dry air of iteration and reiteration of sense.
So, for example, in those condition reports, it basically, from what I'm hearing you say, in the condition reports, that basically kills the object.
No, I don't think it does, because I think it comes back to what it makes new surfaces, but it doesn't kill the previous surface.
Okay, but you were not.
You don't erase one surface by iteration. You just proliferate.
So it's sort of to do with relationships rather than isolation.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's like your work, Sarah, in terms of the dirty media side of things, because you've moved from glitch, which is like, let's say, the stutter, in this sense, to this. It's not layered; it's dimensional, but it's dimensional because of the different networks that get set, or different relations that get set up. Actually, Dane, your work does it too. You know, is that right? Would you see it that way?
I guess so. The central question, I guess, in glitch is, you know, what's intentional and what isn't. So, you know, to what extent is it generative, or does it need some kind of external agency? So that's kind of interesting, because like listening to what people are saying about sound and about stutter, and the fact that, you know, the stutter is almost catching, say, in the Oxbridge sense.
Yeah.
Yes. That's really interesting.
Good, and that's also in the viral sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Let's skip ahead, unless you want to stick with this chapter. Yes.
And what would be the opposite, or how is the body then different from the surface?
Excellent question.
In terms of this
Excellent question. You have a concerned look on your face. So no, it's a good thing. So what is it about that question? What's behind that question, or can you elaborate the question of your question? Like, why worry about that question? What's the worry that you got in there? Just state the question again. Maybe that's.
No, it's the difference between in terms, if we look at this watch on the table, and we would describe it as a surface.
Yes.
How comes your body, if we're talking about you as a body, then in relation to exactly with the sword, and like you are saying with the fingers, then this is your body then in relation to this surface, or is it a body, or is it because I'm
going to put it slightly differently then. Let's look at your work and the notion of something getting lost, or something getting not usable, something discarded. At the moment, everything that's connected in this body is useful, as it were, or anyway, it's part of the body, even if there's like spaces but your uniqueness of your thesis has this moment where you're looking at that which somehow leaves the body. And it does something weird, because it doesn't leave the body so that it's something like coming from the outside now. It has a very peculiar relation. These lost things that you're talking about, these lost bits of what happens with your work.
Well, would it? I mean, I see it much more in the sense that the field I'm approaching is a body with organs, and I try actually to look at it as a body without organs, in the sense that the elements in it do not have or lose the function they are supposed to have, or they are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right.
The stipulated meaning which you would normally consider with a particular object is then taken away into something which makes and that's the thing. Is it then the surface? Is it a surface, or is it a body? And when I say body, I don't talk about one object.
Yes, good. Because you can see here there's a body, but it's not one object, but even it is a body. Right? Were you going to answer that?
I could.
Yes?
Or
Tam, were you going to answer that?
No, yeah, I'll give it a shot. Maybe instead of thinking of BWO, or the body without organs, we could maybe go back to these 2 points to do with the machinic.
So, Stuart and Simon?
Your performance,
or
where
no,
there wasn't a name
Jakob.
for it, Jakob, and your mentioning of the stuttering machines that you have encountered. There's an interesting, I don't want to call it an analogy, but maybe a model in Deleuze of the wasp and the orchid. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
but
the
maybe
idea is
maybe everybody hasn't heard of it. Sorry. So sorry. Sorry. Yeah, whatever.
No, it's fine. I'll sum it up.
No, people haven't heard of it yet.
Okay. So instead of thinking a body encountering another body, and then that being additive or affirmative in some way, Deleuze very paradoxically and interestingly insists on a subtraction. So when a wasp meets an orchid, it's not the wasp becoming orchid or the orchid becoming wasp. It's them canceling each other out to become a machine, or a mechanism plus an organism. And that is a suspension of sorts, I guess.
Yeah, good.
In which there is something operating, but it is thanks to subtraction. Not negation, but kind of a willful subtraction through the encounter. And I don't know your work, but maybe when you think of the discarded element, you could think about it in terms of something being discarded so that something else can form a machine or a model of some kind in that way.
And so, can you just elaborate this thing called a machine event? Not Derrida, but in Deleuze.
Yeah. A machine event is to do mainly with this emphasis on multiplicity and the fact that these encounters are always already happening, and so those kinds of mechanisms and organisms are always meeting, in the sense that in this text that you've read for today, to cut is to always already be in the state of being cut. So there's always a kind of interstitial element, and that's where Deleuze thinks is at the interstice. So it has to do with what you bring together, but not together. In the bringing together, what the event is that takes those singularities away and produces a multiplicity.
So that's a kind of different read of the Heideggerian move, which now seems like a walk in the park, next to that, because the Heideggerian move is suggesting an identity and difference, that you have Dasein, or big B being, let's say, and little b being, and they're both belonging together and also being pulled apart, and that sort of distance, as it were, the proximity and distance that is created, which we might name dwelling, becomes something much more full, except
eventful.
Eventful.
Instead of being, it's the event. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it being with rather than it's being with something?
Not really.
With
Well, yes, but not as you mentioned. Or explain to me how you mean being.
I've been reading some of Jean-Luc Marx's
Yeah, I was thinking
being singular plural, and he talks about sense as an opening.
Yes.
And it's not a being in, it's a being with.
Yes.
So as soon as that sense opens, you can't not be with.
Okay. Yes. Does that help you there?
So
As soon as there's an opening, the difference though is that for Deleuze, it's not opening onto something. It just is. So that's why the becoming X in Deleuze, for example, doesn't mean you're actually going toward something that you may never reach. The going toward is the reaching. That is it. There is not an extra is happening out there or something beyond, right? So that they're slightly different. So there's no. That's why Deleuze doesn't have a transcendental working, because there's no leading on to something. There's no
being singular. It's
There's-
becoming to start with.
Okay.
There's no being to become from. There's just becoming. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to say it again, for Andrea, this notion of the body as a machinic event is fuller, and it has more sense to it. Or it's a better sense of how you, both of you in your work, is looking at how communities or in the archive, how this something gets fully formed without it having these edges. Because even here, it's a bit flat, really. You know, it's still at a Heideggerian, Heideggerian childlike stage. I'm mad at Heidegger, so after the black books that came out, anyway. Moment of silence. I've already mentioned to everybody. We had a long discussion about it yesterday, as a matter of fact, in the MA course. Anyway, side note. Right. Okay. Does that make sense to you, or does that are you here or no?
No, I think you just started this one sentence. It's full with
Oh.
and
Okay.
then the
Okay.
second part, I think. So.
Okay. So to understand a thing called the machinic event, which is what Wood was suggesting was how that he was showing how that worked in, once again, the way in which Deleuze tries to develop a concept by doing a story, which is slightly irritating, but anyway, moment of my annoyance with Deleuze, but with the wasp and the orchid. So don't think of a body being the wasp and the body of an orchid. Then there's two things, and the wasp comes and sits on the orchid and then goes off somewhere else. That's not the rhizomatic moment. The rhizomatic moment is the attraction of the two that create this moment of wasp orchid. No, waspid. Wasp orchid.
Forecast.
Forecast.
Whichever.
So, and that, but we know that the orchid hasn't swallowed the wasp. The wasp hasn't eaten the flower. They're suspended. That suspension is what Deleuze will call later on a machinic event. Because, and the question is, why is it machinic and not, I don't know what, water or something? What's the machinic aspect? Let's not go there at the moment. But it has something that makes it full. The reason I said it and I didn't fill in the full, was because you can't fill in the full. Because if you fill it in with things, then you're already considering this thing called the event as something that holds it, as a container. And you're back to Plato, and he's attacking that. Instead, he's suggesting this more like a virus, or more like a network. It has these movements that will move horizontally, vegetally, as he talks about it, rather than, what do you call it, in a logos sort of form. Does that...
And then you brought exactly this was happened as an event. That's
Yes.
it, right? That's the term.
That's the term.
So-
But what you're doing is you're saying that with this event, let's say this moment of the orchid and the flower, so your thesis, as far as I'm understanding it, something gets lost in that transaction, which I like. And that lost thing, whatever that is, the ink or whatever the story is, ends up becoming bizarrely fertile to do something else. So it doesn't necessarily carry a trace, although it might, but it does something. So the question then, how does the event do something other than just create itself? Because otherwise you just have event, and you wouldn't get anywhere. So that's why he talks about the Stoics' paradox, because you have this relationship between that which is the iteration and that which is the reiteration, to reiterate. And so he's trying to get, okay, well, how do you get outside that? So you get outside that by not asking that question, because the outside doesn't exist any more than the layer exists. You know, it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist. It exists as a story. It doesn't exist as a way of. Yes,
So
Mark.
the wasp orchid,
Yeah.
Adorno would be a concept, and then you'd have the remainder. And the remainder, it can be, which you took as a possibility. The possibility itself becomes like the object that then itself becomes Andrea's left over. It actually becomes like a physical challenge or a physical force itself. The remainder itself becomes a physical possibility.
No, I think that well, my
it's not for the, if the WASP event is not, if the machinic event is not in Heidegger, it would be for the sake of big or something like that, and Deleuze says it's just a machinic event. You cannot justify it for any sake of anything. But they're coming together and in a concept as a creation of the WASP event, the WASP orchid. The remainder is the outside, Andrea's outside, which itself then becomes like an object which kind of, like in Zizek or something like that, like can't become something then that becomes this singularity, this this lump, this foyer, this knot, which may not have be sort of conscious, but it still has a something which can still sort of beneath the surface can act like a biological indigestion or something like this, or something like that. It's something like a headache.
That's right. It's great.
The stutter, it can manifest as the stutter without actually knowing what that is. But
so we're just going to rewrite your thesis here.
What might have been when you worry about what might have been or something, or the possibilities what could have been the contingency of your life or something like this, that then kind of comes back around and then sort of, without you being aware, it persecutes you in a certain kind of way. This is just a kind of story of how it might happen, but it actually becomes a kind of physical part of the of a kind of body event again. It's something I like that.
Yes, but the problem is that
it comes up in umbilious.
I think the short version is no, in the sense that I think that Adorno and how you're using Adorno would be much more useful for you, actually, than Deleuze, because and Zizek in the sense, in the way in which they do talk about remainder, they do talk about how this thing shifts the singularity, but in terms of the event, Deleuze wouldn't go there. I hear this.
No, I'm just agreeing.
Oh, well, I thought you were going no. I was thinking, my
no,
God,
no, it says
you're not invited back. Kidding.
Shut me up if you need to.
No, go on.
The ideal event for Deleuze is what he calls a singularity.
Not a
but it can't be personal. It can't be conceptual.
Yes, this is what I'm saying about this. The possibility itself is not. It's a challenge, but it's not a challenge that you are then aware of. It's a not. It's pre-conscious, as he talks about the singularity. It's
what page are you on?
The sense on the ninth, isn't it? The ninth series, where he talks about these boiling points.
Okay, hold on. What book are we in?
52. This one. Ninth series.
Oh, the ninth series. Okay. Oh yeah, and the ninth series is the ninth series of the problematic.
Yeah.
I love those titles. They sound so like they're going to tell you something, and yet they don't.
Some singularity should not be confused with the personality one expressing oneself.
Mark.
Yes, sorry.
Academy Award. Come on. What are you reading? Say it again.
Thanks, John. Just give me 1 second.
In the first paragraph.
I'm fine. Just need to.
Sort of just up from the end of the first paragraph, he talks about the singularity belongs to another dimension, and that of denotation, manifested as signification. It's not expressed. It's essentially pre-individual, non-personal, and conceptual. So it's so what in my description of calling the orchid a concept, and I'm using that in the sense of friend of the concept, it's just the name for this coming together, but he calls it the abstract machine, not for the sake of anything, it's just a coming together. You can't say it's for God, it's not as though it's an evolution or something for an end. But then the remainder that's left over, that remainder, as possibilities themselves are pre-personal, aconceptual. It's indifferent to the individual. What may become then sort of becomes, I like this idea of this umbilical, the stutter. It's what creates the stutter. It's the indigestion. It's the headache. It's this kind of thing, which is sort of not conscious. That's the remainder. It's the leftover, and those possibilities, those possibilities that you can say exist, but they're the choice of the Damocles sword after you made what was left over after the decisions get made. The be all good becomes the be all good.
I guess what my worry is
Yeah.
that Deleuze really doesn't speak about a remainder in that way.
No.
So whatever's left over, or however you're posing it in the singularity,
Yeah.
it's not going to. It's dimensional. It's not logical in that sense. It's not got the. I mean, it's logical, but it's not logical in the way in which Adorno's developing it. They might end up on the same page, as it were.
Yes.
But what you're saying, I think it's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. But it's just that it's. He's just trying to develop the way in which one can conceive of anything, full, not full, flat, as something that doesn't follow the rules in any way of the dialectical
I'm
move.
thinking about the way Wood said that in the be all kid, it's a minus.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a contraction into a habit, a contraction of sensibility into a kind of habit. So the sensibility that might have been, that could have been, still is part of that fullness. It becomes the remainder, but it's still part of the fullness. It doesn't disappear what could have been. The contraction into the sensibility, the contraction into a singularity, the boiling point, doesn't therefore, the thing doesn't just shed it off. The possibilities are still in the fullness of the being, I think. So the remainder of that itself has the possibility of becoming...
Maybe potential is a better word than possibility, perhaps.
Why?
As far
Why do
as
you
the
say that?
pre-individual.
Because
Because
you're saying something
possibility
is like
assumes that there's something there that I think potential just is still pre-individual.
You know when you yourself become, a lecturer or a job or something like that, you shrink down into the certain, not you become the be all kid, you become a lecturer or something, you've shrunken down into habits of sensibility of a certain kind. You have to do this, you have to do that. There's always that kind of nag when you get up in the morning. I cannot be. It could have been different. It could have been contingent. Something else could happen. It's that which then sort of is. I'm thinking of this kind of sort of pre-individual. It's the manifestation. It's not the manifestation. He says it's not the deno. It's part of the sense of the thing. That you have this kind of creates the stutter. When you're uncertain, the stutter is a kind of uncertainty. So think. So I'm thinking that there's a kind of stutter in the body itself, and it's like with Kierkegaard, the tension between his love of God and his love of Isaac creates that tension.
You mean Abraham's love?
Abraham,
yeah,
sorry. It creates the tension in the body. And the sterile sense of the event being thinking, the thought, which doesn't really help the situation at all, is that kind of possibility that just sort of nags away, drop, raise. There's no way to get over that sterile event thinking in that sense. And I don't know, I'm just possibly...
Tam, what were you going to say? Were you going to say anything? Were you just moving?
I'm just dwelling on some thoughts, but I'm not sure if it's...
There seems a lot of oppositions in this.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Dane, what were you going to say?
To go back a bit, I think, to talk about this idea of tension, essential tension. Thomas Kuhn talks about an essential tension that exists between, say, different scientific models on time, let's say, between Newtonian time or Einsteinian time, and how science changes is because experiments aren't just happening nowhere, they're not connected to what's gone before, they are connected, they're operating at the limits of knowledge.
So he's saying there's a paradigm shift.
Yeah. Well, before the shift, there has to be that tension between competing ideas of knowledge, and that produces a paradox within the established model. a role of, say, someone like Einstein would be to overturn that original model of Newtonian time, for example, and to produce a different sort of sense, to establish time as in a different sort of way, and that's sort of like how you do a PhD. So that you find a way, you work at the limits, and you sort of twist something on the surface of knowledge to make something different, to change the game in some way.
Does that involve chance?
He said, hopefully.
Well, sometimes it could be a small change. It might not.
Does anybody in
have a
this room think
ramification.
of luck? Does anybody believe in luck? Or maybe believe is the wrong word. Does anybody think of this?
I use it. I say it. Yes. I say good luck to people all the time. Yeah.
Yes. Do I
believe it?
No. But here, good luck to you anyway. Well, luck. What else would be like any sort of superstition? Serendipity. Coincidences.
I mean, depends where the limits of the luck is.
The limits of the luck. That's excellent.
Maybe, yeah.
I think that could be a subchapter.
Yeah.
You could say rules of the game there.
Rules of the game, limits of the luck. Yeah, lovely. Lovely. Wow. Love it. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
The ideal game.
The ideal game.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get to that, the ideal event. Yeah, go on.
Because what do you consider to be a lucky event, and what is an unlucky event? Is it going out on the street and finding 100 pounds that nobody claims?
Yeah, that's pretty lucky.
Good luck.
Yeah, I think it's
Then
excellent
yeah,
luck.
why not? I mean, but it's not exactly luck, because the
Well, I was thinking like more like chance. I mean, probably wrong word, luck. When my brother, who I've just said I'm not going to go every single seminar mentioning, Blake, when he completed suicide, it was really horrible. The next 3 or 4 days afterwards, we kept saying weird things. Like, for example, there's a whole fleet. His name was Blake. There's a whole fleet of trucks, a fleet of them. I'm not kidding you, named Blake, and they were all driving by. I'd never ever seen a fleet of huge American trucks. These look like with the word Blake on them, and many examples like this happened. Now, I don't think that Blake, bless him, love him, was sort of managing to gather together a whole bunch of trucks in order to let us know that he was around and saying, something like this. Or one of my sister's friends had somebody who died, or a number of people who died at different times, and whenever they died, for some bizarre reason, they were always able to find good parking spaces. And so she said to Judy, well, the one thing that's going to happen is that you'll find great parking spaces in New York when you're needing to sort out his estate. And every time she has parked, and he died on the 27th of December, and we're now in April, and she's gone up every week, and every week she finds a space exactly where she needs to park. And that has never happened in the history of her experience with New York. Now, of course, this means nothing. Or does it?
Is it a heightened
Sense of awareness or something?
Yeah, heightened awareness, particularly like the trucks.
It's like red car syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's red car syndrome?
Is that, if you decide, for example, that you're going to buy a car and you're going to buy a red car, then suddenly you're driving along and all you can see is red cars, and it's like, yes, red car's the right choice. You're sort of reinforced by.
Maybe.
Because you notice.
I'm not for a minute suggesting.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that it is anything other than something like that.
Yeah. There is the magic.
But then there's this other problem, the magic parking angel. Yes. I have a
I
Sister Grace, let there be a parking space. She always was over her wheel. Sister Grace, let there be a parking space, and there would be.
So are we talking about that wood, about things?
Is wood talking about things?
No.
No,
Are we talking about things that do not make sense within us, this spectrum of knowledge that is kind of, let's say, normative? We're talking about things that make sense within themselves, in a sense, but they are not enclosed completely. So if we talk about luck, or good luck, or someone has good luck, but coincidence, if we remove the subject that can have, call it subconscious or I recognize things now more often because I see blue sky everywhere. So all I want to go is on holiday. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. You're working toward
I
it.
kind of do like all day today. It's like, oh, I'm going to Turkey in September. So
Okay.
many
Focus on that.
many months.
Yeah.
Oh, but isn't that what happens? So it's about those kind of events that don't make sense. It's not the bee and orchid. It's the bee humping a nail.
The bee humping a nail.
I don't know. Goes to the nail and like a dog humps it and flies away, or tries to sting a nail, or something to do. Although stinging a nail would be too obvious because it has a sting to sting a nail. Let's say if bee landed on the nail and like behaved like a horny dog and then flew away.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? At all.
It might make sense to the wasp.
Well, not really, because it wouldn't be a wasp.
Really? Because having had a conversation with the wasp.
It wouldn't be a recognizable wasp behavior as a psychoanalysis of the wasp. Spent years with wasps in the jungle. No, but what I try to say, the events that don't make sense in that kind of linearity in cause event, they make sense within themselves.
Yeah.
They become their own logic of some sort.
Luck is a label, isn't it, for things that are not common sense. So by claiming it with that label, you're making them sense.
Yeah.
So it brings it back into common
And
sense.
what about chance?
So it's a paradox, so that even though you can't explain luck fully, you can because you've given it this title.
Yeah,
So
but that
maybe
title chops it. That's what it does. It creates the end.
It creates a cut.
When you bring, if you can name something that should not, that sounds like Harry Potter and Voldemort, but well, that's not the name. But if there is like luck, the word luck, that doesn't, like, it doesn't have meaning. The word itself, removed from the situation that removed from the point of describing a situation in which something happens that may not happen, or doesn't make any sense for it to happen, but it's positive for the whoever sees it. That's also another part of the life, but it needs to be positive. It needs to be yeah. So it's a productive event in a sense. So it's not that. So happy.
Of course, there's Fortuna.
Yeah. So it's more like Fortuna. Let's say Fortuna, because then you kind of more.
Where you make your luck happen.
Yeah, but in a sense, if you name it, then you bring it to this temporality, to this normality, to this space, to this universe. So if you name it, you bring it to this universe, and you bring in things that does not belong to this universe into this universe, and you cut it because of that, in which you do not investigate it, or allow it to become something, or create a discourse around it, or I don't know, be in it, or lose yourself in it, or don't completely destroy the meaning of the self in it, and just make that there will be something else there, something else not necessarily recognizable, but rather illegible of some sort. And if you.
But I just want to because I just want to make sure that we get everything in before we close the cinema. But I guess the question that you're talking about a universal, not a multiversal.
Oh no, I'm not talking about universal in the overreaching. I'm talking about let's say this universe, the linear time universe. But then there's another universe, and they are not separate together. They are not like, because the luck happens. The event of luck happens within a kind of, even if we understand time linearly, we do see luck. We have an event of the luck. Yeah.
Well, luck is not dissimilar to inventing something that
Yeah,
didn't exist, because
There's something about intentionality down there or something.
there's something about something that doesn't exist but then does for some reason. What were you going to say?
It does exist.
It does
Not
exist.
not the luck.
The what? The intention.
The instance.
The instance. Yes.
Because
Good.
even if it doesn't make sense to you, it makes sense in a different time or a different moment or a different space. And
that's how the series is getting set up.
Exactly, and then it's just the fact that these points met, not by coincidence, but because either one of us intended to take that path. And
So luck appears to us, and it's basically just a flaw in our ability to perceive the whole picture.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you believe that, Dane?
I was just going to say, indifference repetition in the conclusion, Deleuze, it sums everything up by saying that a throw of a dice, say, is indifferent events,
Yes.
but it's a kind of chance that redistributes singularities, so things come into focus or become blurred depending on the indifferent result of the throw. So the game continually changes based on that sort of chance. Chance is indifferent in that sense, but its redistribution allows one to become attuned to different kinds of repetition patterns, things like that.
But yes, very good. But be very yes.
No, I was thinking about, is it Reinhardt's book, The Dice Man?
Yeah.
That plays around living his life
Yes.
based on throwing the dice and stuff. So really, all that stuff kind of.
But be
kicks
very
in.
careful about what you just said is not what was said on this part of the couch, because what you're saying is this notion of how things get, I don't know, generated. But what you were saying, and what Sarah was agreeing with, I think, is that it's just a position. It's kind of where you're standing in the positionality to be able to see things.
Can't it be both?
No.
Why not?
Why not? Simon?
Because there's a big difference between luck and chance.
Okay, that's not quite the answer.
Well,
But that's okay, that is an answer. No, but why can't it just be that knowledge is already all there, it just depends on your intersection to it? Because that's what you're saying, there's whatever is going to be known, whatever's in the world, it's already there, it's all out there, and we just are a little ant, trying to, or whatever, little bug, a little dot, trying to like see this thing, whereas that's exactly the reverse of what Dane is saying.
If the event can't redistribute things, so things can come together to be invented, discovered, made, then it doesn't matter how you try and pick them apart. If the dice isn't cast in a certain way, things aren't brought together, then they just won't they won't make anything. They won't. A work of art won't work as art if the dice isn't cast in a certain way at a certain time.
Right.
When certain things happen.
No, but it sounded to me, I mean, I could have misheard you or wrapped it into the thing I wanted to have it said.
I think what Sarah was kind of that it becomes a glitch, doesn't it? That's what you were Sarah saying, something like that. The luck is a glitch of some sort.
It's just it's a failure of understanding, I think. And I agree that there's the chance is the generative event that then springs up other things, but also it appears to us as being luck because we don't necessarily understand the process. Does that make sense?
No, but why does it have to be something that is understandable or whatever? Because like the Bergsonian position versus the Einsteinian position, with the philosopher and the thingy. What's it called? Scientist. Scientist, that was it, yes. The philosopher and the scientist, where Einstein's argument against Bergson was precisely that Bergson was more or less, I thought what you were saying was what I was hearing Bergson say, which is that it depends on where you are observationally to be able to understand the physics of time and the relativity of time. And what Einstein's saying is it has nothing to do with your understanding. You could be standing on your head.
It's just that we happen to be talking about it and arguing about it.
No. I mean, more. It's not that. It's not that we just have to be focusing on it. It's rather that the way in which one understands that something has happened for somebody might appear. What I heard you say is something that might appear to be luck, whereas for somebody else who gets the whole picture, realizes that it's not luck. It's some other thing going on, and that's a Bergsonian move. And Einstein is basically saying it doesn't matter where any of this is. He's saying that the what happens is the attraction. And it's the attraction that creates the glitch or not the glitch or the things that will stutter. So it's a slightly different thing.
Yeah, I just...
I may be
not
misunderstanding.
understanding, but
Might
I'm
have
just
been.
not seeing those as being necessarily mutually exclusive.
Okay. Anybody want to take up on that? Or no? You haven't saying. You're a very silent creature.
So...
I meant that in a good way.
When you gamble...
Yeah.
It is an attraction, and you win when you gamble. You could call that an attraction.
Yes.
Like
yes.
quantum physics.
What'd you say?
Like quantum physics? Like laws of attraction? I don't know.
I don't know. Is that how you mean it?
Kind of, because you speak about Einstein saying that it is an attraction related to luck, all those
No, I didn't mean it.
events.
Okay, I can see I've taken everybody down a very bad path
Okay,
here.
so like Bergson, there's a subject that observes the time in the sense of it influences the time or kind of perceives the time, and Einstein kind of removes that. There is no subject. Time is. But
Right.
it does not set up time as a constant at the same time.
That's right.
But, like kind of.
In fact, what is the
time
constant? What is the constant for Einstein? Speed of
time,
light.
time is
Speed of light.
speed of
Speed of
light.
light is the only
yeah,
constant.
the limit or the kind of the approach of the limit.
So already, the fact that there's this movement, the fact that there's a speed, that's the constant. That in itself is a weird paradox. That speed is this thing going like this is constant. So what does constant mean if you're talking about speed? I mean that's weird. It's not constant. It's not sort of hovering. And what does it mean? What does it mean if it's constant? It means it creates a limit. But the limit is a limit of speed. Is a limit that doesn't have a line to it. It has energy to it. It's an energy limit. It's not a line limit. And that's why your glitch thing works in media, because you have this kind of movement that's going on that isn't linear in the old-fashioned sense. It could be linear, but it's linear in the speed sense. It creates a limit. Yes, Pam? No.
I hope you can bear with my modest, experience with. I'm trying to figure out like
This
what
is
does
good.
it really mean. But I'm just trying to make some links here, like when you spot the water and ask about like the limits.
Yeah.
And Andrea's question about the body and the what is it? The surface, and then what Jacob's saying about what's the last thing that you said?
Subject. No. Speed of light.
It always come back to this page over here. It's kind of, I'm not sure.
No, that's right.
It talks about being and non-being, and
What page is it?
it's 31 again.
Oh, yeah.
So
Or 39. Okay, yeah, go on.
So here it says, as an attribute of states of affairs, sense is extra being. It is not of being. It is an adequate, which is appropriate to non-being. It kind of goes back to what you're saying about things are becoming, and the becoming
Is the is.
Yeah, and as that which is expressed by the proposition, sense does not exist, but inheres and subsists in the proposition. So, destiny or fate, whatever that is, like if it's not there, or if it's in the non-being, it becomes being just because we're defining it in a way. Yeah.
That's very good for a novice. It's excellent. I mean, you have not. I mean, I don't mean that came out wrong, but I mean that it's very good. If considering this is your first run at it,
Yeah.
it's even good if it was your 50th run of it. It's good.
Okay,
It's
so
excellent.
it's not something extra. It's not
Right.
something that adds to it, like the
Right.
flower and the
Right. Right.
So
Excellent. And it only exists when it exists.
Yeah, it's a sense event.
Yes.
Okay, I'm in the right place.
Yes. Good. Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else have anything to say, or gonna?
I was going to say, in the bee orchid, there must be a bee at one time.
It's a wasp.
A wasp, sorry.
I'm just
Bee,
saying.
Wasp.
Yes.
Fish, orchid, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Animal, vegetable.
Yeah.
There must be a vegetable and animal.
No, let's stick with wasp.
Wasp and
Orchid. Yeah.
which became wasp orchid. But the possibility of them to become wasp orchid must still remain. I mean, can I just quote?
Yeah.
Deleuze on-
Are we going to go back to page?
Yeah. But where he talks on the 53,
Okay.
where he talks, I can't pronounce that. Is that P guy? Degree. It's about that much down. 53.
Which series?
Ninth.
Series.
You got it. What?
Oh, bequeath. Yeah, here it is. Middle of.
Second paragraph.
It's after the italicized history.
Can I just read that?
Yeah.
When he says P-guy,
It is no, it is.
Clearly saw that history and event were inseparable from these singular points. There is the quote. Events have critical points just as temperature has critical points. Points of fusion, congelation, boiling, condensation, coagulation and crystallization. And even within the event there are states of surfeit, and that means extra, doesn't it, surfeit? Yes? Which are precipitated, crystallized and determined only by the introduction of a fragment of the future event.
So this
So I was
follows
thinking
your
with-
work.
With the the wasp and the orchid, the fact that they could come together and the surfeit, in the future, there's, that's what I'm saying, like the possibility or something, that they could always do that again. Unlikely as it sounds, it remains as that remainder, as the outside.
No,
still
but when you
contains-
say come together, they don't meld into one. Because they don't ever really come together. Because it can never be one.
You have those.
You really don't have wasps.
But you have those. Are we talking about an animal that, and you have those wasps on those kind of trees where they have a symbiotic relationship and they only live on those trees, and those trees need those wasps and those wasps need those trees, and they are in a relationship which, without the wasp, the tree dies. Without the tree, the wasp dies. I'm thinking, is that not the kind of
Yes, but
scenario?
the wasp isn't tree.
No, but without one has become, they become a singular machine, a machine in the sense
Event.
that, a machinic event. Whereas the wasp needs the tree, and the tree needs the wasp, and they only survive in that relationship. The wasp doesn't go to any other tree. The tree doesn't have any other visitors except this one kind of
The
wasp.
visitor.
Yeah, so they become this machinic event, this ecology or something like that. But that coming together then still has the possibility of a future, the surfeit within that relationship where they've got, one of these wasps goes and does your nail thing and flies off to another tree and they think, wow, that's a crazy man wasp, and it dies or something. But then after millions of years or something like this, it's still, and then it still flies off, and then you have this thing where
But in that case, the wasp has to fly out of the machinic event.
Yes,
And so when it does that particular event,
becomes another singular. But it's just
the event only exists when it is.
Yeah, but one wasp does not break.
Does not an
machine,
event
but
make.
it flies, but there's still a kind of road or a possibility or a contingency where these outside have a possibility, because they came together itself was the road. This tree and this wasp, they probably quite happy the tree had other insects, but the fact that it only has one, I don't know, in this ecology of the tree and the wasp.
Well, the analogy is in biological terms, Deleuze thinking about what is the event of pollination, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
What exchange is going on between these two entities? It's not what we might presume, which is one is adding to the other or taking the other away, and therefore dominating the other. So the wasp is not dominating the orchid. They are in tandem with one another, producing a machine event.
Yes, they are now in the present. But
Yeah, well that's all Deleuze is concerned with,
Yeah.
is the inevitability of multiple events and presences. So it's not
But
about,
this,
it's just
this
a
idea,
tool to
this
emphasize.
this surfeit he talks about. In that event, there's a surfeit, and he says in the future, he says, these points, they have a crystallization, surfeit, which are a surfeit.
Yes, but you're understanding surfeit as the Adorno's excess, basically. But what he's talking, but a surfeit in that context is more like a nodal point, or more like it's more like something within, except on in a bad way, because it then implies a depth to the surface. So there's no surface, there's just dimensions. So it's something that is a marker, as it were, and therefore can give it a character, can give it
In crystallization, it's the metastable solution that allows surfaces to grow onto the event, which is the seed that's dropped into that metastable solution. So what I understand the surfeit as is this metastable, this potential for more growth or not. It might be that it doesn't take on any more
It
form.
says the surfaces are determined only by the introduction of fragment of the future event. I mean, if you carry on reading this, it says he guy was able as well to invent an entire language amongst the most pathological and aesthetic that one might dream of, in order to explain how singularity is prolonged in the line of ordinary points, but also how it begins again in another singularity. There you go. How it redistributes itself in another set, two repetitions, a bad one and a good one. That one that enchains and one that saves. To me, that sounds like
For Peggy, that's the definition that he's quoting.
Yeah.
But he does go on to kind of develop that after Novalis as well. So he's referencing these thinkers who have kind of embraced similar territory in order to get to this kind of notion of the problematic, which defines the parameters of what can be eventful. And surfeit and possibility, I mean, I understand how you're thinking there, and I think it's Adorno that says it's actually not the real, but the possible that blocks the way to utopian ideas. So it's the presumption that there is a linearity or something better to come, or a development or an evolution that can happen in a vertical or arborescent sense that Deleuze finds kind of misguiding.
Unless it's a rhizomatic sense.
Well, that's a lateral, horizontal solution to the problem that is verticality. So it's again back to Alice growing big or small, and the middle of that blade of grass being emphasized over the root to tip. We're kind of existing eventfully within a suspended state of the sensical or of sense. And that state is kind of fragile. I think he ends the last page of the 12th series talking about the fragility of this realization that he's having about logic and sense and conditions. And I think it's very difficult to get out of different phases of being in order to just think of becoming without any idea of being to begin with. And that's why, this book is so long.
Can you go to the 12th series and,
Yeah, sure.
and just, what page is that?
For us, in the card book, it's page 86.
So that would be, what, 83, I think?
74.
74. And can you just, that's it's the end. You wanted to be the end of the paragraph.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's for us. It's 93.
81, yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you could just read sort of maybe the page before, like, so we may therefore propose.
Me?
So, yeah, if you don't mind. With energy.
With energy, okay.
Yeah.
We may therefore propose a table
See,
of the
absolutely.
development of language at the surface and of the donation of sense at the frontier between propositions and things.
So what does that sentence mean, that first sentence? Because this summarizes basically what we've all been doing in the series here. So does anybody want to just say that so that we can continue? We therefore propose a table of the development of language at the surface and the donation of sense at the frontier. It's very beautifully written, but
So, develop a way of speaking about sense. Is that the way of dealing with it?
the way of, I
Without-
was always very moved by this, I'm glad people speak. I'm always very moved by this particular page. Let's get out. But, because it reminds me of someone who is in love, who speaks about how they love this moment that's giving life, this moment that, how you talk about this richness of things. We propose a table of the development of language at the surface and the donation of sense at the frontier. I mean, this is, to me, a love poem. Okay, don't all look like, I've lost it.
That makes sense.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
No,
Can
it's-
you, yeah. He's saying we must learn how to love sense. We must let that thing be. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, this sort of donation of sense is very much like the submission in Kierkegaard, the infinite resignation to submit to whatever is going to happen when I plunge the knife down into Isaac is going to happen after. You have to submit, you have to bend on one knee, but in a way which you choose to submit, and in
Yes.
that way sort of demand the impossible. And sometimes, with the right cast of the dice, you get the possible. You
It's
win,
a love,
basically.
It's a love poem. Yeah, okay,
Sometimes you
that's
win.
excellent. Sometimes you win, sometimes you win. Okay, go on.
Such a table represents an organization which is said to be secondary and proper to language. It's animated by the paradoxical element or aleatory point to which we've given various double names. To introduce this element as running through the two series at the surface, or as tracing between the two series the straight line of the ion, amounts to the same thing. It is nonsense, and it defines the two verbal figures of nonsense. But, precisely because nonsense has an internal and original relation to sense, this paradoxical element bestows sense upon the terms of each series. The relative positions of these terms in relation to one another depend upon their absolute position in relation to it.
And what's the it that it's in relation to?
You asking me?
Yeah, or you're reading, so you probably have. Simon, do you know? Yeah. Good, excellent.
Sense is always in effect produced in the series by the instance which traverses them. This is why sense, such as it is gathered over the line of the ion, has two sides which correspond to the dissymmetrical sides of the paradoxical element, one tending toward the series determined as signifying, the other tending toward the series determined as signified. Sense insists in one of the series, or propositions. It is that which can be expressed by propositions, but does not merge with the propositions with which express it. Sense crops up suddenly in the other series, states of affairs. It's the attribute of states of affairs, but does not merge with the state of affairs to which it is attributed, or with the things and qualities which realize it. What permits, therefore, the determination of one of those series as signifying and of the other as signified are precisely these two aspects of sense, insistence and the extra being. And the two aspects of nonsense, or the paradoxical element from which they derive, empty square and supernumerary object, place without occupant in one series and occupant without place in the other. This is why sense is the object of fundamental paradoxes which repeat the figures of nonsense, but the gift of sense occurs only when the conditions of signification are also being determined. The terms of the series, once provided with sense, will subsequently be submitted to these conditions in a tertiary organization which will relate them to the laws of possible indications and manifestations, good sense or common sense. This presentation of a total deployment at the surface is necessarily affected at each of these points by an extreme and persistent fragility.
Yes?
It's very much borrowing from Simondon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Can you say
totally.
why? Can you say how?
Because Simondon uses the crystal as a way of describing individuation.
Mm-hmm.
And the crystal only grows at its surfaces, and it only grows through chance, you can't separate the event from its surrounding milieu. He used that term.
And which book are you referring to?
MEOT. I always forget what it's. I just have it in my head as.
You've memorised it as
MEOT. Technical objects. Something about technical objects.
Okay.
Deleuze also, he references, is it Valerie as well on the
Valerie,
crystals and
Right.
images?
Yeah.
That's in here, isn't it? I
Yeah.
can't remember the page. Oh, page 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, no, that's the skin thing.
No, well
That's
done.
similar.
Yeah, no, it's where he's talking about mirror and surface, right? And the flatness of crystals. It's in the second series somewhere.
Ah, yeah, page 9. Bends like crystals, they become and grow only at the edges, or on the edge.
And in growing on the edge, they create the edge.
Yeah.
The edge is always the edge. Good. Excellent. Well, next week, I would like to do all of this up to 15. So we'll backtrack all the way up and we'll get up to 15. Is that okay? Do all of that?
Yes.
Thank you. Feel much better
No,
now.
oh god, that sounded bad, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, my voice came out wrong. Well, just to say, like,
Now, I don't know
it
if
came out dry and
Yeah.
sterile and
But
But the only thing I wanted to end on this little bit here. Oh, lovely people. The only thing I wanted to end on here is that when he talks about wounds and cuts, he's not talking about trauma. He's not talking about the type of trauma that is then talked about in a psychoanalytic move. He's not making a wound in that sense. So you need to understand for next week this question of the way the wound operates. What is this thing wound? What is this thing cut? Because he doesn't mean trauma in the now we must go back and psychoanalyze the trauma, though he's not opposed to psychoanalysis. So it's this cut. This is why I think it's so close to your work, Andrea, because he's talking about how these entities happen and these bits of these cast off. They're not really cast off. And they create other surfaces, or they create nodal points within a different series. Because at the moment we've only done 2 series. You should be thrilled to know. There are many, many, many series, but they're just not series that, are proliferating like confetti. There's logics to them. Okay, was that fun or was that fun?